Hi, I'm Jordan Wesley, the Chief Partnerships Officer at Let's Get Ready, and I'm here today with Carmen Rodi, one of our amazing partners at Furness High School. Welcome, Carmen. Glad to have you. I'd love for you to introduce yourself.
Thank you. My name is Carmen Rodi. I'm a school counselor at Furness High School in South Philly.
You've been a school counselor for a while. You have a lot of experience both in Philadelphia and Boston and other places. So you know better than most people that this is such a critical role in schools, and also that it has been chronically underfunded, understaffed all across the country. The American School Counselor Association has said that the national average caseload size is 385 students to one counselor. And that's just the average, right? So we know that number can get much larger. And not only this, I know from conversation with you when we've spoken that sometimes students after they leave high school then are like coming back to you, right? So you're not only trying to prepare for the next group, students who go on are sometimes coming back to you. So we also know that sometimes students, when they leave school, they're coming back to you to ask for help and resources in addition to the students that you already have. So we have this major counselor shortage issue in our country. And we also know we have incredible students. They're brilliant, they're resilient, they're inspirational. And so both of those things are true. And you sort of live in the middle of those two realities. So I'd love for you to just talk a little bit about what's it like to be a school counselor in the American school system today?
Yeah, I love school counseling and I'm a huge advocate for it. So the American School Counseling Association, which is abbreviated as ASCA, has a recommendation for one counselor per 250 students. Unfortunately, in many schools, the caseload is way higher. I think that after COVID-19, we did see a higher recognition for the needs that students brought to the table for school counseling. But unfortunately, we didn't really see continuation of increased roles. So I've spoken with colleagues that work at schools where they have 600, 700 students. Every state is also different. So Arizona, their stats are a lot higher. And of course, this negatively impacts the students because one person is not feasibly able to reach hundreds and hundreds of students. Yeah, so that's just a huge problem in our field.
Yeah. Yeah.
One other point I was going to make about COVID-19 was that although we recognize the needs for it, with mental health, school counseling role, especially at the high school level, works on 3 categories. This is also in elementary and middle schools, but it's most prevalent in high schools. So with ASCA, we have social, emotional, mental health, we have academics, and we have post-secondary. So counselors are working with students with academics through their teachers, if they're having issues with teachers, if they need to change a class. Often students are first going to go to their school counselor to say that they want a class, understanding what honors and AP classes may mean. So anything related to classes, as well as grades, students who are failing, students who are at risk of repeating, going to summer school, all of the academic stuff outside of the classroom falls on the school counselor. Next, with mental health and social emotional learning, students are struggling and really have always struggled. However, COVID-19 really exacerbated that issue. So many students are dealing with depression and anxiety, as well as other mental health concerns. And the school counselors are kind of the first line of defense for helping students get a higher level of care if needed, like therapy, and also helping them create coping strategies, working with teachers for students who may be missing class due to their mental health concerns. And then on top of that, we also work with post-secondary readiness, so helping students learn about different colleges and careers, setting up college fairs, speaking with college admissions representatives, connecting students with those representatives, creating their college profile, their applications, applying to jobs, creating resumes. So there are so many tasks that school counselors help with on a day-to-day basis. And it's not always kind of fully recognized that all of those things fit under the umbrella. So not only is it important to have a smaller caseload for one person, but also recognizing the high level of needs that all the students bring to the table and all the things that a school counselor does to support them.
Yeah, I mean, you've just described like 5 jobs, right, in sort of one person. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, that is both a lot of expectations that are put on you all, but also really positions school counselors to be like the quintessential generalist to really help schools keep moving forward on so many different levels, which is like it's a great gift to schools and a great addition to the ecosystem of a high school. So, yeah. How have, as you think about sort of all the different roles that you play in the school, all the different ways that you support students, how have Let's Get Ready coaches sort of helped to support and add layers of support to the work that you're already doing?
So as you mentioned, there are a lot of students who graduate in June and may or may not be going on to college in September. But as school counselors, our school year ends with the students. So school counselors are not working over the summer like teachers and other educators. We have the summers off. However, that is the pivotal time for a lot of seniors as they're getting ready for college, trying to figure out what they need to buy for their dorms, if they're living on campus, figuring out any last minute financial aid, choosing their classes, figuring out how to get onto the portals. A lot of colleges each have their own different portal. So it's small things like that. And that's kind of a gap in the system. There's something known as summer melt, which impacts first generation low income students the most, where they may enroll and be admitted and enroll in a college. However, they do not show up in September. And so I think that summer between senior year and freshman year of college is really pivotal to getting those students the services they kind of need. And that's where like the Let's Get Ready coaching can come in, and they can help support those students, text them, hey, here's some information. Do you need help with this? Do you need help with that? So that the students kind of feel like they have someone to go to, because school counselors and teachers, like we're all away for the summer. So having that kind of fill that gap, I think, is one of the most important things.
I don't know if it is. For me personally, I don't know what you would make of this, so I'd be curious. This is a little bit of a curveball. I didn't include this before, but this is making me think about it. In some ways for me, even if we had all of the counselors in the world that we really needed, like the caseloads were the right size and all of that, I think I would still, as a social worker, think training near peers to support one another would be a good idea. Like I think that even with all the resourcing challenges that we have. So I'm curious, Let's Get Ready, we know that when students help other students, there's these incredible sort of ripple effects through the school community and the education ecosystem. And we would kind of talk about that as like the near peer model is this deep held belief and really research demonstrated reality that students are the solution. Students hold the power to sort of help one another and to support themselves as they make decisions beyond high school. So what does that mean to you? It's like this sort of near peer model or this idea of students helping students?
Yeah, I think it's really, really impactful. So working in a high school, we do something similar. We have recently started peer mentorship. A lot of times getting the upperclassmen to work, especially now that I'm with ninth grade, working with the ninth graders. And I do think that the students, especially the younger students, really respond differently to, I could be saying the same information, but if a senior is saying that to a freshman, it just hits different. And so one of the nice things about the near peer model is the students are able to kind of see themselves in somebody else and think, wow, look, if they could do it, I could do it too. And they are at this high school and they've gone through a lot of the things I've gone through. And, I think that just adds like another layer. Representation in general is really, really important in education. We have a dire need for more Black teachers, for example, because studies have shown the impact that Black teachers have on Black students. So we know that representation is important. And then on top of that, representation of, a peer-to-peer is also really, really important. And just earlier this school year, I had paired up a senior who came to talk to me about something completely unrelated. I was with a group of ninth graders, and I just said, kind of off the cuff, hey, do you have any advice for them? And these students all speak Spanish. So he had a conversation with them, and the students were very, very engaged and listening because, again, I think they can hear the same things on websites from adults, but it really helps when they're like closer in age and kind of can see, oh, you're just like a few steps ahead of me, but we share a lot of similarities. You kind of represent my background, and you're going to help me. And yeah, peer mentorship is just such a great model for students to find success.
You, like I mentioned before, you bring a ton of experience to supporting young people, helping them earn their high school diplomas, transition to something after and with their post-secondary goals. And you've been also a voice for the experiences of students, both with the School District of Philadelphia and at the sort of broader state level. You've presented through the district's Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion about the role of social and emotional development with students, and you've advocated for student access at the university level through your work with the Pennsylvania Association of College Admissions Counseling. So in the Let's Get Ready model, our coaches are working with their students to identify and resolve financial, academic, and social barriers to their post-secondary degree completion. So with all of your work and advocacy, I wonder if you can speak a little bit to the near-peer model, specifically around like social and emotional support for students, and yeah, what that looks like and what that means to you.
Yeah, I think it's tricky, right? Because young people, like we can only help someone else as much as we've helped ourselves. I always, one of the common phrases in mental health is that you have to put your own mask on before helping someone else. So that being said, our students are very resilient, but I do think that it's important for young, like as peer mentors, one of the best things you can do is kind of be like, I'm going to therapy. I'm dealing with this issue with a therapist because some things really are just a little bit higher level and like out of scope of like a peer mentor. But again, I think just like we were talking about, students will listen to other students. And what I do love about like this generation is I feel that there is much less of a stigma against mental health as there was even when I went to high school. Mm-hmm. So I do really think that the culture is changing, and that with COVID, all of these younger generations lived through that. It was very traumatic, and so there's kind of a shared lived experiences that they can all kind of go back to and talk about. Everyone, was impacted differently, but for the most part, it was very negative in terms of like increased rates of depression, suicidal ideation, and mental health and other mental health issues. But I do think that with the near peer model, those mentors, those older students can say, hey, this is what I did. I've been going to therapy. Or even if they themselves aren't, my friend is, going to therapy. Luckily, a lot of campuses have more of those resources now as well. So just helping students kind of guide them in the right path that way, I think is important.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, part of what I hear you saying too is that a near-peer model doesn't replace school counseling. It could never, right? That there's these elements that are sort of higher level than their education and preparation. And so really in training and supporting coaches, really the way Let's Get Ready thinks about it is like, yeah, we have to help them understand what they can and they can't do. And then we have to give them tons of scaffolding and support to help them do it well, right?
Yeah. I will add though that like near peer mentors are able to, for example, let's say it's like a small conflict between friends, right? I'm kind of talking higher level of care needed for mental health, but there's a lot of times we get into conflicts as humans, and especially as a young person, you're navigating maybe a conflict with a friend, a conflict with a classmate, and a near peer model can say, hey, this is advice. I've gone through this. Maybe they're having an issue with their roommate. How can I help you figure out this issue, social, emotionally, like navigating those types of conversations? Yeah,
absolutely. We see that pretty regularly when we're reviewing the text messages. There's like, it's conflict there, conflict with the professor, or, wherever that is, and having someone who's going to coach you through that in
Yeah.
a really non-judgmental way. Yeah, yeah, that's great. I want to shift gears a little bit. So you have been quoted in the Philadelphia Inquirer in a 2023 article saying this. So you said, some of these colleges are right in our backyard, or some of the colleges right in our backyard are the hardest ones for the kids to navigate, and they're getting the least amount of money from them. There seems to be a giant disconnect there. And in that, you were speaking to some facts about the education ecosystem here in Philadelphia that really we see playing out in cities across the country. It's not only just a Philadelphia challenge, but the stats here note that at Penn, only 6% of the first-year students are from Philadelphia. At Temple, the number is 15%. It's 14% at Drexel and only 9% at St. Joe's. So from your vantage point, sort of on the ground with students, what do these statistics tell you about the world that you're preparing students for, and your role in that preparation? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that what I've seen in Philly and also in Boston is a college may be located in a community, but there is a very big disconnect between the community and that college, especially I think for kind of the more Ivy League name schools. I will say though that some of these colleges are kind of have taken this and have run with it. For example, Temple last year began offering a new scholarship specifically for Philadelphia students. I think that there are people within these higher education institutions that really do want to do the work. It's very bureaucratic from what I've heard. There's a lot of red tape and systems that need to change in order to get all the students from Philly kind of supported. I do know there are people on the ground. I just want to recognize that there are people on the ground kind of doing the work, but I think systemically there is a huge disconnect between the colleges and the communities, and oftentimes people in the community may just feel like, that's them and this is us in our neighborhood. And we have colleges in Philly that are located in West and North, and other neighborhoods where there is a lot of need in the community. And again, I think it's trying to bridge that connection because people also themselves maybe have experienced deep racism or really negative experiences with a school system. And so it makes sense that they would be distrustful of the school systems, of higher education, seeing it as something that hasn't been a support for them and people in their community. But I think that it's part of kind of doing the work. Financial aid is obviously one of the biggest barriers. So, and colleges may be struggling financially too, but it's, kind of making students, if there's a college in their backyard and they don't see a path to that college, I think that's a problem. And that's really what I was trying to get at in the article.
Yeah. I mean, I hear you. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I wonder, how do you think about your role in helping to bridge that gap with students? What do the conversations with students look like? How does that show up in your work?
Yeah, that work actually, so part of school counseling, as you mentioned, is advocacy. So I actually think it's a little bit above the student level. So that's why I did get more involved with PACAC. Yeah. There was actually a big disconnect there that I've talked with many people about, is that a lot of college admissions folks really wanted to understand what's going on in Philly schools. They wanted a deeper connection with Philly schools, but they were having trouble connecting. So being more involved with the Inclusion, Access, and Success Committee with PACAC has been helpful because I've been able to give suggestions and talk with people. And it's pretty heavy stuff. It takes a lot of work, but I'm kind of finding people on the college side that are trying to do the work as well, and we're working together.
Yeah, that's great. How, if anything, do you see the role of a near peer in the midst of that kind of systemic challenge that you're describing?
Similarly, what I said before, if students end up going to a school in Philly, For example, some students are going to school in Philly, but because it's in Philly and dorms are an added expense, they're living at home. And so typically commuter students might have a different experience, and it might be harder for them to feel connected to the college if they're not living there, and if they may also be working. And so like for them, college is really a very different freshman year experience than someone who has the ability to pay for a dorm and live on campus and experience like the full campus life. So I think near peer mentors, whether or not they themselves are commuter or live on campus, can help bridge that gap, because a lot of Philly students are commuter students. So they can be that bridge for those students and make them feel more comfortable and welcome at the college.
Yeah, and to know they're not alone too, because I feel like sometimes we see like students who are having these experiences where they're having to commute or they have a lot of other responsibilities, so they can't be as engaged in campus life. They feel like, oh, I must be the only one like that, and it's not true, you know.
Right.
And having somebody who's there saying, no, actually, you're not the only one here in Philly, and you're not the only one nationally either. You know, there's this whole group of people across the country who are having similar experience to you. So, yeah, it's really powerful. Well, we've been talking a lot about the near-peer coaching model, because obviously, let's get ready, that's what we care about. But, you know, it's not like the only silver bullet. It's part of a larger ecosystem of supporting students. And I know that for your work, particularly at Furness, you have been a huge champion for partnership in the school. And you've brought in a lot of different partners to help do the work with your students and get them access to resources. So why is partnership so important to your work?
So partnership, I believe, as a school counselor, is like really pivotal towards helping students find what they need to be successful. One example that kind of comes to mind is Launchpad. We've had really great success in partnership with Launchpad. We are expanding our computer science program at our high school level, and Launchpad works with students who may not be fitting like the traditional college model and are instead kind of interested in a hands-on apprenticeship model, and they want to do computer science and coding. And so with our partnership, we've now been able to help a lot of students who maybe didn't feel like college was the path they wanted to go, but they did want to pursue a higher career, and they love computers. So it's that type of partnership is so helpful, because now we say, hey, here's an option for you. And we have such great success working with our school and with that partner, because now they've said, oh, you know, Furness, these kids have come in, actually, they took the computer science class, so they kind of come in more ready than others. That's kind of like, we work back and forth with them, and they're just one out of many partners, but I do think we've had a lot of success with them. Obviously working with Let's Get Ready and having the near peer model as well. But in general, I just think partnerships are so crucial to these students and their success, because as school counselors, again, we're just one, one with a large caseload, and different students need different things. So whether that's therapists, mental health services, a group counseling, family resources, there's the gamut is so large. And so I think it's just really helpful, because we couldn't do anything without community.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. I wonder really specifically what you might say to a fellow counselor who's like trying to decide, should I bring in another partnership? Should I not? What do you say to people who might worry about having too many partnerships, or what advice might you give to them about how to think about their partnership strategy more broadly in the school?
I think it's recognizing what the needs are in your school, and then going from there, and also recognizing what your expectations and responsibilities are with that partnership, because we do have some partnerships where it is a pretty heavy lift. And, over time we can say, like, is this worth it? And we've had some conversations where we say, you know what, I don't think it's worth it, because look at all the work we're putting in and the reward is not there. So that's kind of case by case and team by team. With Let's Get Ready, I will say that it hasn't been a heavy lift, which is really nice. I set the students up, they have a meeting with Katie, and then I help get the the contact information, you all kind of take it from there. So I think it's looking at kind of what your role and responsibility is with the partnership, how much time is it going to take, and do you have the capacity? And then again, weighing like, what do my students need, and will this be beneficial? And then always going back, because maybe sometimes a partnership might work out for a little bit, and then unfortunately, like the roles change and the person you're working with, and it just gets a little more, like I said, like too much work for not as much reward. So, it's always conversations you can have with your principals and your co-counselors.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and there's such an important role for like data tracking and looking at like what's this actually resulting in for our students. And I know we've had a chance a little bit to look at data with you all, and I wonder if you could speak to how that data is kind of informing your work with Let's Get Ready.
It's helpful to know just kind of what some of our alumni students, like that they're still involved in college, and then some of the concerns they're having, and just so that we can have that kind of window into what's going on with them. It's tough because like we have a lot of alumni who kind of go off, and then we're not really able to support them like we were talking about earlier. So it's nice to know that they do have someone that's like checking in on them.
One thing I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about is as in-person educators, me personally as a social worker, and I'm sure you as a school counselor, we've been trained in this world like foot to the pavement work with students, right? Like pull them out of their classrooms, press into events, show up in the cafeteria, like whatever it takes to get them in your office, having a conversation, doing what you got to do. Or I, especially when I was like early in my career, I remember I always had supervisors who would say like, students vote with their feet. If they're not in your office, then they're telling you something about the support you're providing, right? So this sort of like really on the ground movement. But Let's Get Ready is doing something very different. We're using this sort of text-based virtual model where it's not the same kind of work that especially I was trained up in as a social worker. And so I'd love for you to talk a little bit about how have you adjusted to this sort of model as an educator and as someone who works as a school counselor? Like, what strengths do you see that the text-based model brings to complement the work happening kind of in a more in-person way?
I think it helps meet students where they're at. And so obviously this younger generation many of them actually have like phone addictions. They're on their phone. Adults as well, honestly, everyone. It's kind of a phenomenon for everyone. But teenagers especially, because they've grown up with phones for many years, and that's what they're used to communicating with. Social media, obviously. But because that's kind of their form of communication, I think it's a good way to like meet them where they're at. I like too, though, that in my work I'm able to be in person and they know who I am, because I will say that I think one of the downsides of all this technology is that we're losing the face-to-face connection. But I also know that like I see someone, I've gotten a prescription through a virtual doctor that I've never met in person. And it was so much easier to just go on there and screen to screen see this doctor and say, this is kind of what, I had COVID. And so like, this is kind of what's going on. And then it's 5 minutes. Whereas I would have been, driving to the clinic, finding parking while I'm really sick, and potentially getting others sick in that in-person space. So I do feel like obviously to anything, there's pros and cons with technology. But I do think that for students, like it's something they're used to. And I think it's something maybe as like a baseline and it kind of builds from there. But yeah, the technology can be helpful for sure.
Yeah. It's not an either or approach, right? It's
right.
It's like we were talking about earlier. It's like a complement to the work you're doing.
Yeah. I typically I use an app, and I try to get the students to download the app, and then I'll send announcements. Hey, this club's happening after school. Remember to bring in your money for this field trip. Those kinds of announcements you can make now virtually, and the students will see it probably before. And read it before, like, in person. Yeah. It's easier on us, too, as educators.
Yeah, that's true. Thank you so much for being with me today. I'm glad we had a chance to talk. I'm really grateful for all the work that you do as students.
Thank you.
Yeah.